The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from 47 different species gathered for what many considered their most desperate hour. Ambassador Thyrix of the Zephyrian Empire tapped his clawed fingers against the crystalline table, his scaled face showing the strain of 3 sleepless cycles. Across from him, the insectoid representative from Hive Cluster 7 clicked her mandibles in agitation while reviewing the same documents they had all memorized by now. The holographic display at the center of the chamber showed a 3-dimensional map of the Outer Rim territories, with large red zones marking areas now under complete draconic control. These crimson patches had grown steadily larger over the past 5 standard years, swallowing entire star systems and trade routes that had been the lifeblood of galactic commerce for centuries. The situation grows more dire each passing day, announced Chancellor Vex, the amphibious leader of the council whose blue-green skin had taken on a sickly pale hue. The Dragon Dominion has now claimed 17 more systems. Their latest declaration states that any vessel, military or civilian, entering their expanded territory will be destroyed without warning. A collective shudder ran through the assembled delegates. The dragons had made good on such threats before. Entire fleets had been reduced to cosmic dust when they dared to challenge the ancient reptilian species that had suddenly emerged from the galactic core after millennia of isolation. The Corvalian trade minister, a short humanoid covered in fur, stood up with visible effort. His species had been hit particularly hard by the draconic expansion, losing 3 of their most profitable mining colonies in the past month alone. Honored council members, my people are facing economic collapse. The dragons have severed our primary shipping lanes. Without access to the Helix Nebula trade route, our entire civilization faces starvation within 6 months. Murmurs of sympathy and shared concern echoed through the chamber. The Corvalians were not alone in their suffering. Every species represented here had lost something to the dragon's relentless territorial expansion. What made the situation particularly frustrating was the dragon's complete refusal to engage in any form of diplomatic communication. "Have there been any responses to our latest peace overtures?" asked the Talarian ambassador, a tall, thin being whose telepathic abilities had made her species natural diplomats for generations. Chancellor Vex's expression grew even more grim. "The dragons burned our last diplomatic vessel before it could even transmit its message. The crew of 300 was vaporized instantly." He paused, letting the weight of that loss settle over the assembly. That was the 14th attempt at peaceful contact. Every single one has ended the same way. The recorded history of dragon galactic relations made for disturbing reading. 5,000 years ago, the dragons had been active participants in galactic civilization. Ancient texts spoke of their wisdom, their technological prowess, and their role as mediators in interstellar conflicts. Then, for reasons no scholar had ever fully understood, they had withdrawn completely to the galactic core, vanishing from all contact with the outside universe. Their return had been as sudden as their departure had been mysterious. 3 years ago, dragon ships had begun appearing at the edges of known space, not to trade or communicate, but to claim territory. They had established a growing perimeter around their core systems and defended it with a ferocity that had shocked the galaxy. The dragons' military technology far exceeded anything the Galactic Council possessed. Their ships seemed to be living entities rather than constructed vessels, capable of self-repair and adaptation during combat. Their weapons could tear through the strongest shields like they were made of paper, and their defensive capabilities had proven virtually impenetrable. "What about the human delegation?" asked the Altarian representative, a tall being whose crystalline body refracted light in rainbow patterns. "They requested to address the council today regarding this crisis." Chancellor Vex nodded reluctantly. "Indeed, though I confess I am puzzled by their confidence. Humanity is the youngest species in our alliance, having achieved interstellar travel only 2 centuries ago. Their technology is primitive compared to most of ours, and they have no military force capable of challenging the dragons. Perhaps that is exactly why we should listen to them," suggested Ambassador Thyrix thoughtfully. "Every advanced species has tried to solve this problem using conventional diplomacy and military strategy. Maybe an unconventional approach is what we need." The chamber doors opened with a soft hiss, admitting 3 human representatives. The lead figure was a woman of average height with short brown hair and an expression of calm determination that seemed oddly out of place given the gravity of the situation. She wore the simple blue uniform of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, with only a small Earth insignia marking her rank. Behind her walked 2 companions, a tall man with graying hair whose uniform bore the markings of the Terran Space Navy, and a younger woman carrying what appeared to be a standard diplomatic case. Honored delegates, the lead human said as she approached the central podium. I am Ambassador Sarah Chun of the Terran Federation. Thank you for allowing us to address this assembly. Her voice carried easily through the chamber despite her lack of vocal amplification technology that most species required. Ambassador Chun, Chancellor Vex replied formally. We welcome Terra's perspective on our current crisis, though I must say we are curious about your delegation's apparent optimism. Your preliminary reports suggested you believe you may have a solution to our dragon problem. Sarah Chun smiled slightly, a human expression that most of the assembled aliens had learned to interpret as a sign of confidence or amusement. With respect, Chancellor, I don't believe you have a dragon problem. I think you have a communication problem. A ripple of surprised murmurs ran through the chamber. The Zephyrian ambassador leaned forward. Ambassador Chun, perhaps your species is not fully aware of the scope of this crisis. The dragons have rejected every attempt at communication. They destroyed diplomatic vessels on site. How exactly is this a communication problem? Because, Sarah replied, you've been trying to communicate with them the way you communicate with each other. But dragons aren't like us. They're not even like each other, from what our research indicates. She gestured to her younger companion, who activated a holographic display showing various dragon ships and territorial markings. Our xenobiologists and historians have been studying every available record of dragon behavior from before their isolation. We found some interesting patterns. Dragons appear to operate on fundamentally different social and cultural principles than any other known species. The display shifted to show ancient texts and artwork depicting dragons in various contexts. In every historical account, dragons are described as beings of immense pride and very specific honor codes. They don't just communicate through language or technology. They communicate through actions, through demonstrations of worth, and, most importantly, through offerings that show understanding of their values. Are you suggesting we should attempt to bribe them? Asked the insectoid representative sharply. Not bribe, Sarah said firmly. Honor. There's a significant difference. According to our research, dragons have always valued sincerity, personal courage, and genuine respect above material wealth or political power. Every diplomatic attempt so far has followed standard galactic protocols, formal messages, official ceremonies, and delegations of high-ranking officials. She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled delegates. But what if dragons see all of that as empty posturing? What if they're waiting for someone to approach them not as a political entity seeking concessions, but as an individual showing genuine respect for their nature? The Corvalian trade minister shook his head in disbelief. You're talking about approaching the most dangerous military force in the galaxy as an individual? That's not diplomacy, that's suicide. Maybe, Sarah acknowledged. But it's also the only approach that hasn't been tried yet. And if I'm right about dragon psychology, it might be exactly what they're waiting for. Chancellor Vex studied the human ambassador with new interest. What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador Chun? I want to take a small, unarmed ship into dragon territory. Not as an official representative of the Galactic Council or any government, but as one being seeking to understand another. I want to find out what they actually want, what they're protecting, and why they've chosen isolation over cooperation. The chamber erupted in heated debate. Voices rose in a dozen different languages as delegates argued over the wisdom, legality, and sanity of such a proposal. Some called it brilliant. Others declared it the height of foolishness. Even if the council approved such a mission, Chancellor Vex said when the noise had died down, what makes you think you would survive long enough to communicate with them? They have destroyed every ship that has entered their territory. Sarah's smile widened slightly. Because I'm not going to try to communicate with them using words, at least not at first. I'm going to try to communicate with them using something that transcends language barriers. And what might that be? Asked Ambassador Thyrix. The young woman behind Sarah stepped forward and opened her diplomatic case. Instead of the expected documents or communication devices, she withdrew what appeared to be several rectangular packages covered in colorful writing. Food, Sarah announced simply. Specifically, instant noodles. The silence that followed was so complete that the ambient hum of the station's life support systems seemed unnaturally loud. Several delegates stared at the packages as if they might explode at any moment. I beg your pardon. Chancellor Vex finally managed. Our research indicates that dragons, despite their fearsome reputation, are actually omnivores with a particular appreciation for complex flavors. More importantly, sharing food is one of the oldest and most universal gestures of peaceful intent across virtually every species we know of. But it has to be the right kind of food. Sarah picked up one of the packages. These instant noodles represent something uniquely human. They're simple, honest, and designed to provide comfort and nourishment with minimal resources. They're not exotic delicacies or expensive trade goods. They're everyday food that ordinary people eat when they want something warm and satisfying. The Talarian ambassador's telepathic abilities allowed her to sense the genuine conviction in Sarah's thoughts. "You truly believe this will work?" "I believe it's worth trying," Sarah replied. "The worst that can happen is that I die trying something new instead of dying while repeating the same failed strategies. The best that can happen is that we open a dialogue with a species that could be a powerful ally instead of a devastating enemy." The debate that followed lasted for 3 standard hours. Military advisors called the plan reckless. Political analysts declared it naive. Economic specialists worried about the precedent of sending unauthorized diplomatic missions. But, as the discussion continued, a curious thing happened. One by one, delegates began to acknowledge that conventional approaches had not only failed but had made the situation progressively worse. The Dragon's territory continued to expand. Their military responses grew more aggressive. Time was running out for a peaceful solution. Finally, Chancellor Vex called for a formal vote. All those in favor of authorizing Ambassador Chin's unconventional diplomatic mission. The vote was closer than Sarah had expected, but it passed. 24 species voted in favor, with 23 opposed. It was enough. "Very well," Chancellor Vex announced. "The Terran Federation is hereby authorized to attempt peaceful contact with the Dragon Dominion using methods of their own choosing. However, this mission is entirely voluntary and undertaken at your own risk. The Galactic Council cannot provide military support or official protection should things go wrong." "Understood," Sarah replied. "We'll need a small, unarmed vessel and clearance to approach the Dragon perimeter. Beyond that, we're on our own." As the council session ended and delegates began filing out, many approached Sarah to wish her luck or express their hopes for her mission's success. A few, however, pulled her aside to share warnings or advice based on their own encounters with Dragon forces. The Zephyrian ambassador was among the last to speak with her. "Ambassador Chun, I admire your courage, but please understand what you're facing. I commanded a battle group that encountered Dragon ships 6 months ago. We outnumbered them 5 to 1, and they destroyed half our fleet before we could retreat. These beings are not just powerful, they seem to view most other species as insects beneath their notice." "Maybe that's the problem," Sarah replied thoughtfully. "Maybe they see us all as representatives of governments and institutions rather than as individuals. Maybe what they need is someone who approaches them not as an ambassador or a military officer, but just as someone who wants to share a meal." The Zephyrian's expression showed deep skepticism, but also a grudging respect. "I hope you're right. For all our sakes." 2 days later, Sarah stood in the docking bay of Starbase 7, looking at the small courier ship that would carry her into Dragon territory. The vessel was barely larger than a shuttle, with minimal life support and no weapons of any kind. Its cargo hold contained exactly 3 items: a food preparation unit, a supply of fresh water, and 200 packages of assorted instant noodles. Her naval companion, Commander Torres, performed final safety checks on the ship's systems. "You know, Sarah, it's not too late to add some defensive capabilities. Even light shields might make the difference between life and death out there." Sarah shook her head firmly. "No weapons, no shields, no military technology of any kind. If this is going to work, it has to be completely genuine. The Dragons need to see that I'm coming to them with nothing but good intentions and a willingness to be vulnerable." Dr. Lisa Park, the expedition's xenobiologist, emerged from the ship's small cargo bay. "The food preparation area is ready. I've programmed the unit with cooking instructions for 17 different varieties of noodles, from mild chicken flavor to extra spicy shrimp. If Dragons have taste preferences anything like the historical records suggest, we should have something that appeals to them." As launch time approached, news of the mission had spread throughout the station. Crew members and civilians gathered in observation lounges to watch the small ship's departure. Many considered it a suicide mission, but others saw it as a desperate hope for peace. Sarah took her place in the pilot's seat, running through pre-flight procedures with practiced efficiency. Despite her diplomatic rank, she was a qualified pilot with hundreds of hours of experience in various types of spacecraft. This mission required skills beyond political negotiation. "All systems green," reported Commander Torres from the co-pilot's seat. Course laid in for the Dragon perimeter. Estimated travel time, 14 hours. Starbase 7. This is diplomatic vessel Friendship requesting clearance for departure, Sarah announced over the communication system. Clearance granted, Friendship. Good luck out there. The small ship pulled away from the starbase and oriented itself toward the distant red zones on the navigation display. As they entered hyperspace, Sarah reflected on the magnitude of what they were attempting. In 14 hours, they would either be dead or making contact with one of the most feared species in the galaxy. The journey passed in relative quiet. Commander Torres monitored ship systems and reviewed tactical data about Dragon military capabilities, though such information would be useless if hostilities began. Dr. Park spent her time studying Dragon physiology reports and refining her theories about their social structures. Sarah used the time to practice meditation techniques she had learned during diplomatic training. The key to successful first contact, she had been taught, was to approach other species without preconceptions or fears. She needed to be completely open to whatever the dragons might show her about themselves. As they approached the Dragon perimeter, the ship's sensors began detecting unusual energy signatures. The boundary of Dragon territory was marked not by physical barriers, but by a network of sensor devices that monitored all approaching vessels. Within minutes of crossing that invisible line, they would be under observation. Sensor contact, Commander Torres announced. 3 large vessels approaching from our starboard side. Configuration matches known Dragon ship designs. Through the view screen, Sarah could see them, massive, organic-looking vessels that seemed to flow through space rather than simply traveling through it. They moved with a grace that no artificial ship could match, their surfaces rippling with patterns of light that might have been communication signals or simply expressions of the living technology that comprised them. They're not firing, Dr. Park observed with surprise. Every other ship that's approached this closely has been destroyed immediately. Maybe they're curious, Sarah suggested. We're not broadcasting any military signals, we're not demanding passage, and we're not trying to establish official communication. From their perspective, we might be something entirely new. The Dragon ships took up positions around the small human vessel, clearly escorting rather than threatening it. Sarah could see more details of their construction now. Surfaces that looked more grown than built, what appeared to be sensory organs along their hulls, and propulsion systems that generated no visible exhaust or energy signatures. Friendship, we're receiving a transmission, Commander Torres reported. It's not in any known language, but it seems to be some kind of navigation instruction. Sarah studied the data stream appearing on her console. The mathematical concepts were universal, showing a course toward what appeared to be a large space station or habitat in the inner system. They want us to follow them somewhere. That's more communication than anyone else has received. The journey to the Dragon destination took another 6 hours, during which time their escorts maintained perfect formation around them. No attempts at verbal communication were made, but Sarah noticed that the Dragon ships occasionally displayed patterns of light that seemed responsive to changes in the human vessel's course or speed. When they finally arrived at their destination, Sarah could only stare in amazement. The structure before them was unlike anything in the galactic database, a massive habitat that appeared to be a hybrid of architecture and biology. Spires and domes grew from what looked like living coral, while streams of energy flowed through organic conduits that pulsed with their own internal light. It's beautiful, Dr. Park whispered. It's like they've learned to grow their technology instead of building it. A docking bay opened in the side of the habitat, clearly designed to accommodate their small ship. Sarah piloted the vessel inside, noting that the bay sealed itself behind them and quickly filled with breathable atmosphere. Whatever the Dragon's intentions, they seemed prepared for biological visitors. As the ship's systems confirmed safe environmental conditions outside, Sarah prepared for what might be the most important moment in galactic history. She gathered several packages of instant noodles, a portable cooking unit, and a supply of fresh water. Are you sure about this? Commander Torres asked for what felt like the 100th time. No, Sarah admitted. But I'm sure that doing nothing will lead to continued conflict. Whatever happens next, at least we'll have tried something different. The ship's airlock cycled open, and Sarah Chin stepped into a Dragon habitat for the first time in galactic history, carrying nothing but food and hope. The corridor beyond the airlock defied every expectation Sarah had formed about Dragon architecture. Instead of the cold, metallic passages found aboard most spacefaring vessels, she walked through what could only be described as a living tunnel. The walls curved organically around her, their surface warm to the touch, and covered in patterns that shifted slowly like breathing skin. Bioluminescent strips provided gentle illumination that responded to her presence, brightening as she approached and dimming after she passed. Commander Torres and Dr. Park flanked her as they moved deeper into the habitat, their footsteps muffled by the soft, organic flooring that seemed to absorb sound. The air carried scents unlike anything in the galactic database, something like flowering trees mixed with the clean smell of ocean spray, and an underlying warmth that reminded Sarah of fresh-baked bread. The atmospheric composition is remarkable, Dr. Park whispered, checking her handheld scanner. Oxygen levels are actually higher than what we're used to, but there are trace elements here that I don't recognize. It's like they've created a perfect ecosystem in miniature. They had been walking for nearly 10 minutes when the corridor opened into a vast chamber that took Sarah's breath away. The space soared hundreds of meters above them, its ceiling lost in a canopy of what appeared to be living crystal that filtered light into dancing rainbows. Gardens of impossible beauty terraced down the walls, with plants that seemed to glow from within and water features that flowed upward in defiance of gravity. But it was the chamber's occupants that truly amazed her. Dragons moved through the space with fluid grace, their forms more diverse than any historical account had suggested. Some were the traditional serpentine giants of ancient legends, their scales gleaming like polished jewels as they glided through the air without visible means of support. Others were more humanoid in proportion but retained distinctly draconic features, elongated skulls, powerful tails, and skin that shifted color with their apparent moods. What struck Sarah most powerfully was the sense of calm purpose that pervaded the entire scene. These were not the savage, warmongering beasts that galactic propaganda had painted them as. They moved with dignity and intelligence, tending to complex tasks that seemed to involve both technology and art in equal measure. A young dragon, no larger than Sarah herself, approached their group with obvious curiosity. Its scales were a deep blue-green that reminded her of Earth's oceans, and its large golden eyes held an intelligence that was immediately apparent. When it spoke, its voice was like wind chimes mixed with distant thunder. "Welcome, small ones. The eldest has been expecting you." The fact that it spoke standard galactic shouldn't have surprised Sarah, but it did. "You speak our language?" The young dragon's expression might have been amusement. "We speak many languages. Communication has never been our challenge with your peoples. Understanding has been the problem." Before Sarah could ask what that meant, another voice echoed through the chamber, this one so deep and resonant that she felt it in her bones as much as heard it with her ears. "Bring them to the heart chamber, young Silas. But slowly. Let them see what we have built here." Their guide, apparently named Silas, gestured for them to follow. As they moved through the habitat, Sarah began to understand the scope of what the dragons had created. This wasn't just a space station. It was a complete civilization suspended between the stars. Every surface was alive with purpose, from the coral-like structures that processed the station's atmosphere to the flowing energy networks that seemed to power everything through biological processes. "How long have you been building this?" Dr. Park asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming diplomatic protocol. "Building?" Silas seemed puzzled by the question. "We do not build in the way your species understands the concept. We grow. We nurture. We allow things to become what they wish to become. This habitat has been growing for nearly 1,000 of your standard years." They passed through galleries where dragons worked on what could only be called art, though it incorporated elements of science and technology that Sarah couldn't begin to understand. One massive dragon, its scales the color of burnished copper, shaped streams of pure energy into complex patterns while smaller dragons adjusted harmonic frequencies that made the entire structure resonate with music. "It's incredible," Commander Torres murmured. "They've integrated art and science into a single discipline." "All knowledge is one knowledge," Silas replied simply. "Your peoples divide wisdom into categories, but wisdom resists such division. Beauty, function, truth, harmony, these are not separate concepts." The heart chamber, when they finally reached it, was unlike anything Sarah could have imagined. The space was roughly spherical, its walls covered in what appeared to be a living map of the galaxy. Stars pulsed with their own light. Trade routes were visible as streams of flowing energy, and the territories of various species were marked in different colors and patterns. At the center of the chamber, on a raised platform of living crystal, waited the most magnificent being Sarah had ever seen. The eldest was enormous, even by dragon standards, her scales ranging from deep purple at the base to silver at the tips, creating an effect like starlight on deep water. Her eyes were ancient beyond measure, holding depths of wisdom that made Sarah feel like a child in the presence of a grandmother who had seen the birth of worlds. Ambassador Sarah Chun of Terra, the eldest, spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the very structure of the habitat. You come to us bearing gifts of food and offering friendship. This is unexpected. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward, very aware that she was likely the first non-dragon to stand in this chamber in millennia. Honored eldest, I come not as a representative of governments or military forces, but as one being hoping to understand another. I bring simple food and simple questions. The great dragon studied her for a long moment, and Sarah had the distinct impression that she was being evaluated on levels beyond the physical. Show us your food, small Sarah-chun. Show us what your people consider worthy of sharing. With slightly trembling hands, Sarah unpacked her portable cooking unit and began the process of preparing instant noodles. The simple, mundane act felt almost ridiculous in this place of impossible beauty and ancient wisdom, but she had committed to this approach completely. As the water heated and she opened the first package of noodles, a curious thing happened. Dragons throughout the chamber began to move closer, their attention focused on her simple food preparation. She could sense their genuine interest and something that might have been amusement. In my culture, Sarah explained as she worked, sharing a meal is how we say that we wish to know someone better. It doesn't matter if the food is simple or elaborate. What matters is the willingness to sit together and be present with each other. The eldest lowered her great head closer to observe. And what do these instant noodles represent in your culture? Sarah thought carefully before answering. Comfort. Simplicity. They're what people eat when they want something warm and satisfying without complicated preparation. Students eat them when they're studying late. Workers eat them when they need a quick meal. Parents make them for children who need something familiar. They are honest food. As the noodles finished cooking, Sarah was struck by inspiration. Instead of preparing just one serving, she began making several, using different flavor packets and adding various ingredients from her supplies. Soon she had created 5 different bowls of steaming noodles, each with its own distinct aroma. Would you join me? She asked the assembled dragons. I've made enough for everyone who's interested. The silence that followed lasted so long that Sarah began to worry she had committed some terrible cultural mistake. Then, slowly, the eldest reached out with one delicate claw and accepted a bowl of the chicken-flavored noodles. What happened next would be talked about in diplomatic circles for generations to come. The ancient dragon, ruler of one of the most feared civilizations in the galaxy, carefully tasted instant noodles and made a sound that could only be described as pleased surprise. The flavor is modest but genuine, the eldest pronounced. It does not pretend to be more than it is, yet it achieves its purpose completely. This is wisdom in simplicity. Other dragons began accepting bowls, and soon the heart chamber filled with the sounds of quiet conversation as they experienced human cuisine for the first time. Sarah found herself sitting cross-legged on the crystal platform, sharing a meal with beings who had been painted as monstrous enemies just hours ago. Now, the eldest said as they ate, you may ask your questions, Sarah-chun, but know that we will ask questions of you as well. Sarah had prepared carefully for this moment, but sitting here in this incredible space, sharing noodles with dragons, her scripted diplomatic inquiries seemed absurdly inadequate. Instead, she found herself asking the question that had been bothering her since her arrival. Why did you leave the galaxy 5,000 years ago? And why did you return now? The eldest's expression grew thoughtful, and the colors of her scales shifted toward deeper, more muted tones. We left because we grew tired of the endless conflicts that plague the galaxy. Every species seemed determined to impose its will on others, to expand and consume and dominate. We withdrew to grow in wisdom and to develop technologies that worked with life rather than against it. She gestured to the living walls around them. For 5 millennia, we learned to listen to the songs of creation itself. We developed arts and sciences that your peoples would consider impossible. We became something more than we had been. But why return to claim territory? Commander Torres asked. If you found peace in isolation, why risk conflict now? The great dragon's eyes flashed with something that might have been pain. Because the songs of creation are growing silent, young warrior. The galaxy is dying. Dr. Park leaned forward urgently. Dying? What do you mean? Another dragon, This one with scales like polished obsidian spoke up. Your species exploit worlds until they are exhausted. Then, move on to the next. You strip resources without giving back. You pollute ecosystems without consideration for their balance. The network of life that connects all things is unraveling. The eldest nodded sadly. We return not to conquer, but to preserve. The territories we claim are not for expansion, they are sanctuaries. We take control of damaged worlds and heal them. We protect species on the verge of extinction. We maintain the delicate balances that your civilizations have forgotten. Sarah felt a chill of understanding. The Corvallian mining operations in the Helix Nebula. You shut them down because they were destroying something important. The nebula contains nursery worlds for 17 different species, confirmed Silas. The Corvallian extraction processes were poisoning the stellar medium where these beings reproduce. In another generation, they would have faced extinction. But why not communicate this to the Galactic Council? Sarah asked. Why the secrecy and isolation? The eldest's laugh was like distant thunder. How many times have your peoples been told that their industrial practices damage ecosystems? How many warnings about climate destruction, resource depletion, and species extinction have been ignored? We tried communication for 3,000 years before we withdrew. Your species respond only to action, not to words. Commander Torres bristled slightly. That's not entirely fair. Many species have learned from their mistakes and developed sustainable technologies. Some have, the obsidian dragon agreed. Your own Terra has shown remarkable progress in recent centuries. This is why we allowed your vessel to approach rather than destroying it. Humanity has demonstrated the capacity for wisdom. Sarah began to see the outlines of a larger picture. You've been testing us. All of the galactic species. You've been waiting to see who would learn to balance progress with preservation. Testing implies an experiment with predetermined outcomes, the eldest corrected gently. We have been observing, hoping, waiting for evidence that younger species could mature beyond the hunger that consumes worlds. Dr. Park had been unusually quiet, but now she spoke with obvious excitement. The territorial expansion isn't random. You're creating a network of protected systems, aren't you? A galactic preserve system. A beginning, the eldest confirmed. But it cannot succeed in isolation. We need partners among the younger species. We need civilizations that understand the difference between growth and consumption, between progress and destruction. As the implications of this revelation sank in, Sarah realized that everything about the galactic crisis had been misunderstood. The dragons weren't conquerors or isolationists. They were gardeners on a cosmic scale, trying to preserve life itself from the destructive expansion of younger civilizations. What would partnership look like? She asked carefully. The eldest exchanged glances with several other dragons before answering. Joint stewardship of critical systems. Shared development of life-sustaining technologies. Gradual education of your peoples in the arts of harmonious existence. And, above all, the wisdom to know when not to take, when not to build, when not to expand. Commander Torres looked skeptical. The Galactic Council represents dozens of species with very different values and needs. Getting them to agree on preservation protocols will be almost impossible. Almost impossible, Silas observed, but not entirely impossible. Your presence here proves that some among your peoples are capable of approaching problems differently. If 3 humans can sit peacefully in our heart chamber, sharing simple food, perhaps there is hope for greater understanding. Sarah realized that this moment represented a turning point not just in galactic relations, but in the entire trajectory of civilization itself. The choice facing every spacefaring species was stark: learn to live in harmony with the cosmic web of life, or eventually destroy themselves and everything around them. How long do we have? She asked quietly. The eldest's colors shifted toward deep blue, indicating what Sarah was learning to recognize as profound sadness. Without significant changes in current practices, the cascade failure of galactic ecosystems will reach irreversible levels within 200 of your standard years. With partnership and wisdom, that timeline could extend indefinitely. The weight of cosmic responsibility settled over Sarah's shoulders like a heavy cloak. She had come here hoping to prevent a war, only to discover that the real stakes were the survival of life itself throughout the galaxy. Will you return with us to address the Galactic Council? She asked. Will you explain this to the assembled representatives? We have tried formal communication before, the eldest replied. The results were disappointing. Words alone cannot convey the urgency of what we face. Understanding must be experienced, not simply heard. Then, what do you suggest? The great dragon considered for a long moment. Send us representatives from each member species. Small groups, like yourselves. Let them see what we have built. Let them understand what we offer. Let them experience the harmony that is possible when wisdom guides technology. Sarah nodded slowly. Cultural exchange instead of political negotiation. Precisely. Let your peoples learn our arts while we learn theirs. Let understanding grow naturally rather than being imposed through treaties and formal agreements. Dr. Park had been taking notes throughout the conversation, but now she looked up with obvious concern. What about the territorial expansion? The Galactic Council sees it as aggression, and their fear is driving them toward military responses that could be catastrophic. The eldest's expression grew troubled. We cannot halt our preservation efforts while bureaucrats debate policy. Every day of delay means more damaged systems, more extinct species, more disrupted ecosystems. However, we can adjust our methods to reduce the appearance of threat. She turned to address Sarah directly. If the Council agrees to our exchange program, we will communicate our intentions more clearly before claiming new territories. We will provide explanations for our actions and offer partnership opportunities to species willing to embrace stewardship responsibilities. And if they refuse? Commander Torres asked. The silence that greeted this question was more eloquent than any words could have been. Sarah understood that the dragons would continue their preservation work regardless of galactic cooperation, but the choice between partnership and conflict remained entirely with the younger species. I'll need to return immediately to present this offer to the Council, Sarah said, rising from her position on the crystal platform. How should I contact you with their response? Silas spoke up cheerfully. Oh, we will know their response long before any formal communication reaches us. The network of life carries information faster than your fastest ships. But, for courtesy's sake, you may transmit messages to the coordinates where you first encountered our escorts. As they prepared to leave, the eldest made an unexpected gesture. She extended one claw towards Sarah's remaining supplies and delicately picked up a package of spicy shrimp-flavored noodles. May we keep this? The great dragon asked. As a reminder that wisdom can take the simplest forms, and that the most important bridges are built not with grand gestures, but with shared meals and open hearts. Sarah smiled and bowed deeply. It would be an honor. The journey back through the habitat felt different now. Where before Sarah had seen alien architecture and incomprehensible technology, now she recognized a living system designed around principles of harmony and sustainability. The dragons they passed no longer seemed like fearsome warriors, but like gardeners tending to the galaxy's largest and most important garden. As their small ship undocked from the dragon habitat and began the journey back to Galactic Council space, Sarah reflected on everything that had changed in the past few hours. She had arrived carrying instant noodles and hope for peace. She was returning with the blueprint for a completely new relationship between civilization and the cosmos itself. The real work was just beginning. The Galactic Council chamber had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 47 species shouted, argued, and gestured wildly as Sarah Chen's report echoed through the vast space. 3 days had passed since her return from Dragon territory, and the political upheaval showed no signs of diminishing. Preposterous, declared the Corvalian trade minister, his fur bristling with agitation. You expect us to believe that the dragons are environmental guardians? They destroyed our mining operations and cost my people billions of credits. Ambassador Thyrix of the Zephyrian Empire stood to address the chamber. While I respect Ambassador Chen's courage, we must consider the possibility that she was deceived. The dragons are master manipulators. They could have constructed elaborate deceptions to mask their true aggressive intentions. Sarah remained calm at the central podium, though she could feel the weight of skeptical stares from dozens of different species. Honored delegates, I understand your doubts, but I've brought more than just testimony. She activated the holographic display system, filling the center of the chamber with recordings from her visit to the dragon habitat. The assembled representatives fell silent as images of the living architecture, the integrated ecosystems, and the peaceful dragon society played out before them. Dr. Park stepped forward to provide scientific analysis. These recordings have been verified as authentic by 3 independent xenobiology labs. The technology the dragons have developed represents advances beyond our current understanding, but it's clearly focused on biological harmony rather than military applications. Technology that could easily be adapted for warfare, interjected the Talarian ambassador. Living ships, organic weapons systems, biological warfare capabilities, the potential for devastation is enormous. The potential exists, Sarah acknowledged. But so does the potential for healing damaged worlds, restoring extinct species, and creating sustainable civilizations. The question is, do we choose to focus on fear or on opportunity? Chancellor Vex raised his hand for silence. As the voices died down, he spoke with the weariness of someone who had spent days mediating impossible debates. Ambassador Chun, even if we accept your interpretation of dragon motivations, their proposal for cultural exchange remains problematic. They're asking us to send representatives to their territory with no guarantees of safety or return. Actually, Sarah replied, they've offered a significant gesture of good faith. She activated a new section of the holographic display, showing technical specifications that had been transmitted from Dragon territory just hours earlier. These are the designs for atmospheric processors that can restore damaged ecosystems in a fraction of the time required by conventional terraforming. The Dragons are offering to share this technology with any species willing to participate in joint stewardship programs. The chamber erupted in excited whispers. The Altarian representative, whose crystalline body reflected the hologram's light in rainbow patterns, spoke for many when she asked, "The ecological restoration potential of this technology is extraordinary. But what would they want in return?" "Partnership in preserving critical systems," Sarah replied. "Joint research into sustainable technologies. And, most importantly, a commitment to balance expansion with conservation." The debate that followed revealed the deep divisions within galactic civilization. Progressive species like the Altarians and Talarians expressed enthusiasm for environmental cooperation, while industrial powers like the Corvallians and several military-focused civilizations remained suspicious of Dragon intentions. Commander Torres, who had remained silent through most of the session, finally spoke up. "Delegates, I've served in the Terran Space Navy for 20 years. I understand military threats and aggressive expansion. What I saw in Dragon territory was neither. Their defenses exist to protect what they've built, not to project power beyond their borders." "Then, how do you explain their continued territorial expansion?" demanded the Corvallian minister. "Because," Dr. Park interjected, displaying a new series of charts, "every system they've claimed contains critical ecological components. Look at the pattern: nursery worlds for endangered species, key nodes in galactic mycorrhizal networks, systems with unique atmospheric properties essential for interstellar weather patterns. They're not claiming random territory. They're preserving the infrastructure that keeps the galaxy alive." A Trilaxian delegate, representing one of the galaxy's oldest spacefaring civilizations, rose slowly to speak. His species had been exploring the stars for over 10,000 years, and his words carried the weight of that experience. "The Trilaxian archive contains records dating back to the last period of Dragon isolation," he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite its soft, whispered quality. "Our historians have spent the past 3 days reviewing those ancient files in light of Ambassador Chen's report." He paused, allowing the significance of his species' historical perspective to register with the assembly. "The last time the Dragons withdrew from galactic society, it was preceded by a period of ecological collapse that destroyed 17 civilizations. Whole species went extinct not from war or disease, but from environmental degradation. The Dragons attempted to warn the galaxy for centuries before they gave up and retreated to preserve what they could." The silence that followed this revelation was profound. Sarah could see the implications registering on faces throughout the chamber. This wasn't the first time the galaxy had faced this choice, and the previous failure had led to civilizational collapse on a massive scale. "Are you suggesting," Chancellor Vex asked slowly, "that the Dragons' current actions are based on historical precedent?" "I'm suggesting," the Trilaxian replied, "that species capable of surviving for 50,000 years do not make decisions lightly. If they believe the galaxy is facing ecological collapse, we should take that warning very seriously indeed." The mood in the chamber began to shift as the weight of cosmic history settled over the assembled delegates. This wasn't just about trade routes and territorial disputes anymore. This was about the survival of civilization itself. Sarah seized the moment to present the Dragons' specific proposal. The Dragons have suggested starting with a small pilot program. 5 species would send cultural exchange delegations to Dragon territory for a period of 3 months. During that time, they would learn Dragon technologies and share their own innovations. If the program succeeds, it could be expanded to include all Galactic Council members. And if it fails? Asked Ambassador Thyrix. Then, we continue on our current path and hope that the dragons are wrong about the timeline for ecological collapse, Sarah replied bluntly. But, given their track record for planetary management, I wouldn't recommend betting against their environmental predictions. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than Sarah had hoped but sufficient for approval. 26 species voted in favor of the pilot program, 21 opposed. The 5 participants would be chosen by lottery from among the supporting species. As fate would have it, the Altarians, Talarians, and, surprisingly, the Trilaxians were selected, along with the Zephyrian Empire and humanity itself. Each species would send a delegation of 3 to 5 members representing different aspects of their civilization: science, culture, governance, and technology. Over the following weeks, Sarah found herself coordinating the most complex diplomatic mission in galactic history. Each participating species had different requirements, concerns, and objectives. The Altarians wanted to focus on energy technologies. The Talarians were interested in telepathic communication with dragon consciousness networks. The Trilaxians sought to understand how dragon society had evolved during their isolation. The Zephyrians, despite their initial skepticism, had become some of the most enthusiastic participants once their historical researchers confirmed the Trilaxian archives. Ambassador Thyrix would personally lead their delegation, bringing with him experts in stellar engineering and ecosystem management. The human delegation presented its own challenges. Sarah would return as the diplomatic representative, but selecting the other team members required careful consideration. Dr. Park was an obvious choice for her xenobiology expertise. The third member would be Dr. Marcus Webb, a systems theorist who specialized in sustainable technology integration. The journey to Dragon territory aboard the specially modified transport vessel Harmony took 2 weeks. During the trip, the 5 delegations worked to establish common protocols and shared objectives. Language barriers were quickly overcome through the use of universal translators, but cultural differences proved more challenging. The Altarians viewed the mission as a scientific expedition, approaching each interaction with analytical precision. The Talarians treated it as a spiritual journey, seeking deep psychological connections with dragon consciousness. The Trilaxians maintained their role as historical observers, documenting everything for their vast archives. The Zephyrians, military-minded by nature, struggled with the concept of approaching dragons without defensive preparations, while the humans found themselves serving as cultural mediators between the other groups. When they finally arrived at the dragon habitat, now designated as Haven Station by the dragons themselves, they were greeted by Silas and a delegation of dragon cultural specialists. The young dragon had apparently been selected to coordinate the exchange program, a responsibility he approached with obvious enthusiasm. "Welcome, friends from afar," Silas announced as the delegations gathered in the same chamber where Sarah had first shared instant noodles with the eldest. "We have prepared individual habitats for each of your species, designed to meet your specific environmental and cultural needs while allowing for interaction and learning." The accommodations were beyond anything the visitors had imagined. Each species had been provided with living quarters that seemed to understand their biological and psychological requirements intuitively. The Altarian crystals resonated with energy frequencies that enhanced their natural luminescence. The Talarian spaces included isolation chambers for meditation and telepathic work. Even the humans found their quarters comfortably familiar while incorporating subtle dragon design elements that seemed to reduce stress and promote creativity. The first week of the exchange program focused on basic cultural orientation. Each delegation spent time learning about dragon society, history, and philosophical frameworks while sharing their own civilization's achievements and challenges. Sarah was amazed by the depth of dragon knowledge about galactic species. They had been observing and studying younger civilizations for millennia, not out of scientific curiosity, but from genuine concern for their well-being. The dragons understood the political, economic, and social pressures that drove destructive expansion better than most species understood themselves. "Your peoples are not evil," the eldest explained during one memorable session where all 5 delegations gathered to share meals and exchange ideas. "You are simply young. The hunger for growth, for expansion, for more, this is natural in young civilizations. The challenge is learning when enough is enough, when growth must transform into wisdom." Dr. Webb, the human systems theorist, had been particularly struck by dragon approaches to technology development. Everything they build is designed to enhance natural systems rather than replace them, he reported to Sarah after a week of intensive study. They don't see technology as separate from nature. They see it as nature's conscious expression. The Talarian delegation had made perhaps the most profound discoveries, establishing telepathic contact with what they called the Dragon Overmind, a shared consciousness network that connected all dragons throughout the galaxy. Through this connection, they had gained insights into the true scope of environmental degradation affecting the galaxy. It's worse than any of our models predicted, reported the Talarian ambassador, her expression grave. The network of consciousness that connects living worlds is breaking down. If current trends continue, we'll face cascade failures that will make individual planetary collapses seem minor by comparison. But alongside the sobering environmental data came extraordinary opportunities. The Altarians had learned to create energy systems that actually enhanced local ecosystems instead of depleting them. The Trilaxians were documenting sustainable technologies that could revolutionize galactic civilization. The Zephyrians had developed partnerships with dragon engineers to design defensive systems that protected worlds without consuming massive resources. The breakthrough moment came during the third week when the delegations began working together on joint projects. Combining human innovation with dragon wisdom, Altarian energy expertise with Talarian consciousness research, and Trilaxian historical knowledge with Zephyrian engineering skills, they created solutions that none of them could have developed alone. The prototype atmospheric processor they built during their stay could restore a damaged world's ecosystem in just 50 years instead of the centuries required by conventional terraforming. The organic computing systems they developed could manage planetary resources with an efficiency that eliminated waste entirely. Most remarkably, they had designed communication networks that allowed different species to share consciousness temporarily, creating empathy and understanding on levels previously impossible. Sarah realized that what they were witnessing wasn't just technological advancement, but the birth of a truly galactic civilization, one that integrated the wisdom of the ancient dragons with the innovation of younger species to create something entirely new. As their 3-month stay neared its end, the dragons made an unexpected announcement. They were prepared to share not just their technologies, but their territories as well. Any species willing to embrace stewardship principles could establish joint colonies in dragon space, working together to heal damaged worlds and protect endangered ecosystems. This is not charity, the eldest explained to the assembled delegations during their final formal meeting. This is survival. Your species bring energy, creativity, and fresh perspectives that we need. Together, we can build a galaxy where growth serves life instead of consuming it. When the exchange delegations returned to Galactic Council space, they brought with them more than just new technologies and scientific data. They brought hope for a fundamentally different relationship between civilization and the cosmos. The final vote in the Galactic Council chamber was held exactly 6 months after Sarah's first journey to Dragon territory. This time, instead of debate and argument, the chamber was filled with excitement and possibility. 43 species voted to join the Dragon Council Partnership Initiative, with only 4 abstaining and none voting against. As Sarah stood once again at the central podium, she reflected on how much had changed since her simple attempt to share instant noodles with an alien species. That humble gesture had grown into a galactic revolution, transforming fear and conflict into cooperation and hope. The age of endless expansion is ending, she announced to the assembled delegates. The age of conscious stewardship has begun. Together with our dragon partners, we have the opportunity to create a galaxy where every species can thrive while respecting the web of life that connects us all. 1 year later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, the first joint Dragon Galactic facility, watching as ships from dozens of different species arrived to participate in healing projects throughout the galaxy. Former mining worlds were being restored to their original beauty. Extinct species were being brought back from preserved genetic material. Most importantly, young beings from every spacefaring civilization were learning to see themselves not as conquerors of the universe, but as gardeners of infinity. The instant noodles that had started it all were now available in the station's commissary, prepared by both dragon and non-dragon chefs who had learned that the simplest gestures often carried the greatest wisdom. In a universe of infinite complexity and wonder, sometimes the most profound truths could be found in a bowl of simple, honest food shared between friends. And, in the heart chamber of Haven Station, The eldest kept a single package of spicy shrimp-flavored instant noodles in a place of honor, a reminder that wisdom often comes in the humblest packages, and that the future of the galaxy had been changed not by grand diplomatic gestures or military might, but by one human who understood that the path to peace begins with the willingness to share a meal.